Previously on agentpalmer.com, Entwined Legacies celebrated in the Day the Music Died doc. Hollywood hatred aside, Violent Ward plays out like a great film, and Craig's still fighting the good fight while I'm adjusting to the word change from content creator to artist. This is the Palmer Files, episode 91 with Margo Donohue. The Brooklyn Fit Chick returns as a newly published author of Filmed in Brooklyn, a book about film history and the history of film in Brooklyn. We discuss the creation process and reception for her book, but we also talk about using the time you have wisely, reading and writing, humility, healthy egos, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 91st episode is returning guest and newly published author, Margo, the Brooklyn Fit Chick Donohue. Margo's first appearance back in episode 4 of this podcast is worth revisiting if you haven't heard it before, but she's here this time plugging Filmed in Brooklyn, a book that she was almost comically overqualified to write. We discuss her relationship with Brooklyn, and as for movies, she's already discussed many of those on her various podcasts. She is, like me, an artist. Someone who can absorb and share stories because it's the right thing to do. We discuss those stories and those processes. We also discuss researching Filmed in Brooklyn, taking photographs, the dream of publishing a book, reading and writing, processes, marketing, healthy egos, and much, much more. Before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all contact information for Margo and myself in the show notes. You can find more information about Margo, her book, and many podcasts at her website, brooklynfitchick.com. And Filmed in Brooklyn, her debut published work, can be found at many large retailers and online as well. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, including my review of Filmed in Brooklyn, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. Margo, you wrote a love letter to Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Can I be the first to say that it could only come from someone who wasn't born there?
I think you're right.
It's because I live less than a quarter mile from where I was born. I haven't been here my whole life. I have moved around. It just so happened that when it came time to buy a house, I bought one in the town I was born in. But I don't think, and maybe it's like the bias of where you're born, I don't think I could have written the book you did about my town. I think you need that outsider perspective. No matter how long you've lived there, you still know a time where you didn't, and I think that that's important. But but your love of Brooklyn shines through. It's kind of amazing to me.
Well, thank you. That was the whole point. I'm glad you felt that way when you read it.
Well, and it's funny because it felt like there were many opportunities for you to just make it a New York book. Mm-hmm. And you didn't. Like, you were like, I'm going to stick to Brooklyn. I'm going to stick to what I know. I'm not going to go into the other boroughs.
Well, that's what my publisher wanted too. So it was, I approached them to write a book about Park Slope, which is where I live in Brooklyn. I've been here since 1995. I have a rent stabilized apartment. So I'm kind of in that point in my life. Like I'm kind of burrow here for a while, if you'll pardon the pun.
Sure.
And my friend Margo, who is my co-host for Book versus Movie, we're both named Margo, yes. She had written a book about La Colonia, which is in Oxnard, California, which is where her people are from, her family. And it's her publisher's History Press. And she said, you should pitch them about your neighborhood because you love it so much. I'm like, all right. So I pitched them and they looked all over my social media and everything and said, we'd actually like you to do a book about film locations in Brooklyn. We've been doing that lately. We're doing a series of them. I think we feel like you would get it, the material. And they said, would you be interested? And I'm like, hell yeah. And a couple of months later, COVID hits. So I was a teacher at the Y. The Y closes. Everybody shuts down. So I have all this time to watch movies, and I had an idea of what I wanted the book to look like and feel like because I'd read the other ones, but it became a whole new ballgame. I just was like, I'm just going to watch as many movies as I can. I'm going to investigate. I'm going to do everything I can to find out how many movies were actually made here and try to watch them all. I couldn't finish them all. Baby Mama, I have no idea how it ends, and I don't care. Or Kazam. But I went to as many spots as I could that I found, and I just did so much digging. Sometimes like New York Times in the 80s when they were on set for a movie, like tried to figure out where they were. There's a couple like I couldn't find, but I found over 250 movies.
So there's a few photography pieces from you in the book. Did you, of the ones you found, are there like that many more? Because there aren't 250 pictures in the book. Did you take pictures of most of those things that you found? I
did actually. Okay. Because I was just also part of like social media. When I was just out and taking photos, I'd be like, hey, I'm doing a book about movies, and this is where they shot. This is where Christopher from The Sopranos, he played Spider in Goodfellas. This is the place where he was shot. It doesn't need a page in the book. You don't need to see the image. It's a nail salon now. But it's just kind of fun and interesting when I was doing it at the time. But, two things that I found that were very challenging was one, getting images, licensing images from movie studios. They all wanted a lot of money. And I really stupidly thought like, oh, it's PR. No, they didn't. Yeah. And then secondly, unfortunately, my brother, who was going to be my photographer, passed away during COVID. So then I picked up my habit from high school, and I used to be on the newspaper and I used to take photos, and I just bought a new camera and started taking my own images. So those were like the two things that sometimes caused the challenge, but also like made it more personal. I also really worked hard. I found Netflix was great in giving me images, by the way. Netflix PR department gave me wonderful images that I use in the book, and a few of them are on the cover. But yeah, I found this love of it, and promoting it as I was going was like, like I said, we were all in COVID. We were stuck home, and it was really, really amazing to be able to have something fun in the middle of, really bad times sometimes.
Well, I think that regardless of political affiliation or thoughts or weird conspiracy theories, we were all inside for the most part. And my hat goes off to you for being able to look back and go like, I used that time wisely. I created a book. Because there were a lot of people that treated it like a vacation. There were a lot of people that will never remember what they did during those 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, however you look back on it. And you get to go, here's this tangible book that I created. This was something good that came of it. And I think that obviously you kept podcasting during that, and yes. I kept podcasting and blogging during so I kind of understand the creation nature, but this is something wholly unique that was like, I don't know, the universe kind of lined up. And
in a strange way, it certainly did. I couldn't have written this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. There was something about, yes, there's the COVID times, but there's also just who I am as a person and where I am in my life and how I look at things. You know, the way I looked at movies when I was 20, 25, 30, it's not the way I look at it now.
Well, let me ask this from a location standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Could you have written this book 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago as far as being in love with Brooklyn, or is that take a while as well?
I fell in love with Brooklyn right away. I was a huge fan as soon as I got here.
Okay.
And it was funny because this was considered the cheaper place to live versus what we call the city, Manhattan. You know, the Upper East Side, where a lot of people go when they graduate college, or they were in these little railroad apartments in Hell's Kitchen or in Chelsea. I was like, here, I'm like, wow, we have actual rooms and a regular sized bathroom and kitchen, and we're near the park. This is perfect. How am I in New York City? And it's like, this is one of the most expensive places. But now the average price for a home is over $1 million here. It's just become this. Yeah. But I think it's part of it was just being home like everybody else and just having to dig for things. And, 5 years ago, I had like 3 or 4 jobs. I could never have taken the time to do this the proper way. The fact that we were home and it really made me focus, and it made my writing better, and it made my concentration better, everything, it worked for me. Look, I had some losses during it too. And I know a lot of people who lost so many people, and it's terrible. And it's, we're not going to forget this time, but I can say to you, yeah, I did use it in the best way I could, in the most advantageous way I could for my sanity, and also just for my creative spirit.
Let's talk about the creative spirit for a moment, because you are someone who creates content on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Was until this opportunity presented itself, mm-hmm. was becoming a published author ever?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. So that was in the cards.
It was in the cards. I started when I was 10. I would write my own books. I was a massive reader. I was that nerdy kid that always had her nose in a book kind of person. When I came to New York, I've pitched books several times. I've had an agent a few times. It's very hard to sell a book. There's a lot of people who want to sell them. I also was somebody who had I have a lot of ideas. They would say this could be a magazine article, but this isn't a book. And I was like, yeah, I get it. You're right.
I just want to use, I need you on speed dial, because and I've talked about this before, but it's a misconception that keeps coming up, which is oh, you're a blogger. When are you going to write a book? It's that's not. No, first of all, I'm happy with the content I'm creating, so let's not ignore that fact. But the idea that oh, you must want to do something more. It's no, I'm not belittling myself by blogging. This isn't slumming it. This is the content I want to create. But the idea that it's not easy to sell a book, I feel like I need to just talk to Margo, right? Ignoring the fact that all you know about me is I'm a blogger and you didn't ask what I actually write about. They're just to make that jump, which is a jump I get all the time. And I don't understand it, but I also know that it's hard to finish a manuscript. Ignoring the editing process and the actual publishing process from start to finish, a book of 80 pages to 800 pages, no matter what, is really hard to do.
It's the most challenging thing I've ever done. It is, for sure. And it was a labor of love. But for me, a lot of it, I joined a writer's group, and that's what really kind of kicked me in gear. And I'm in a fantastic group of women who write scripts and poetry and nonfiction and fiction and song lyrics, and they do everything. And they were the ones that really helped me, get that feedback that you need for, to get the finished product going. But the rest of it was just, keeping at it. And there were times I got tired of it. There were times that I was like, God, if I have to read about Coney Island one more second, I'm going to scream. But then on the other hand, but once I finished, and it was so amazing. My friends threw a party for me in Brooklyn. It was so great. First time, I was out in a long, long time. And one of the people there did a trivia game based on my book. And he said, I am on the creative, I work in films, but I'm on the business side. And he says, I want you to take a second and pat yourself in the back for finishing a book, because it's one of the toughest things. Creating anything and finishing it is always challenging. There's always going to be things that block you, that get in your way. And he says, the fact that you did it, you really need to just take their time and really appreciate that. And I do. My name's on the side, it's awesome.
So I want to ask about your writers group for a moment, because a lot of the writers groups I'm aware of are not like the one you just described. They are, this is my poetry group. This is my author group. How important for you, obviously you can only speak to your experience, but I'm asking about it. How important is it for you to know that the feedback you're getting is not just from other people who want to write books? It is from people who have an experience in other forms of writing. Was that variety helpful?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would give them all a chapter of the book, and they all had their own ideas, what was missing from it, or what worked for them, what didn't work for them. I want this book, anybody to pick it up and read it, to feel comfortable, to feel like I'm offering great suggestions. I'm offering history. I'm offering so much for them. And I wanted to make it, so that it was historically accurate and that it looked great. But also, I just wanted it to be fun. I wanted to pick up the book and just like, ooh, wait a second. I'm going to be in Windsor Terrace, and this was filmed there, and that's filmed there. I'm going to look them up, that kind of stuff.
Where does the travel part of this book come in? Like, where in the way? Because I read this book as someone who had a background in travel marketing for a while. And I'm reading this book going like, this is a pretty good travel book. Like, ignoring the movie part, I think almost every chapter where you're talking about a neighborhood is like, stop here for a coffee, stop here for a hot dog. Like, you've included all of, stop here for a photo, sit down and enjoy this park. Like, was that part of the initial thing, or did it develop over, like, as you were taking the photos or something?
It developed over the time. I mean, in some places, because I would spend a Saturday and I would walk to where the Sophie's Choice house is. And when I found it and I took pictures, I'm like, oh my God, these homes are beautiful. Like, this is the quality you would get in the Hamptons, and it's right here. Like, these huge porches, and it's gorgeous. Windsor Terrace I bring up because there's Farrell's, which is this beer joint that's been there since 1933. There's also a place called Dog Day Afternoon, which is filmed across the street from where they filmed Dog Day Afternoon, and they have the best hot dogs. So it became, that was a part of it. One of my favorite days was the day after July 4th, like a year and a half ago, when I got a Lyft driver and I had a few addresses, and I said, we're going to go out to the Clemenza house for The Godfather. And he was from Argentina, and he loved The Godfather. And we talked about The Godfather the whole way there. And then he's like, I'm just going to take you on for the afternoon. Where else do you want to go? And so I just started looking up addresses, and we went to where they had Coming to America. We went to where they filmed Ghost, which I didn't know was filmed partly in Brooklyn. And he would call his family and be like, this is the home with Whoopi Goldberg. And I realized, like, people like that shit. They really like knowing that stuff. It just adds to the area. It adds to the adventure. And so many people visit Brooklyn. It just seemed to make sense to me.
So that's part of the process of creating the book. The book's been out for a bit now.
Right.
What has the response been for you?
It's been great. I was really, I'll tell you, I was surprised that the big chains took my book, but like the littler bookstores didn't in my neighborhood. And a part of it is like, did I ask too often? Was I too pushy? I mean, the delicate balance that you have to have when you're marketing something. Do you push but not too much, or where is it going to fit? Because to me, I got very frustrated. I actually had an event. It was at somebody's home, and it was a presentation, and the whole presentation just kind of, it went kerblooey. Like, the internet went out, the machine wasn't working well. It was really awful. And I had bought this box of books to sell there because they told me, oh yeah, we're going to have like 80 people. And we did, but 2 of them bought a book because it was so I got so frustrated because my local bookstore wouldn't pick up my book for whatever reason, that I went on Facebook into the Park Slope group and said, hey, I got a book. You want to buy it from me? I'll sign it and I'll deliver it to you in person, $30, or whatever. It was $23.99. And like people sent me messages like, I need 4 of them. I need 5 of them. This is the perfect Christmas gift. And they were so delighted just to support. And I would want it too. I'd support an artist, of course, a local author. Absolutely. But to be also like, this was a good gift and it feels personal. It worked out. So I sold enough books I could take myself on vacation.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to set this question up by saying I helped my friend make a movie. And this is a friend that, and we talked about it on the podcast a couple episodes ago, but the idea is we always and forever are always doing these ongoing projects, like my blog or his streaming or his art or something, right? And so we finished the movie, this big one-off project, and I went, what's next? Because that's who we are. Like there's always what's next. And that's the way my mind works, because I don't just do a podcast and then stop. I don't just do a blog and then stop. It's ongoing. I think to me, the scariest part would be like, Jason, end this. Like what? What? No, like I don't want to stop, but I understand that there are one-off projects. And as inopportune as that may have been, you've just finished a movie that took you a couple of years. What's next? I get that. Like, but still, I all of that is a preface to say, like, is there another one? Like, are you, does this give you more or less incentive to get back out there and start pitching more books?
It gives me more incentive. Having a book, it makes it so much easier to pitch another book. It makes it easier to find an agent. It makes it easier. Also, it just being in the writers group that I'm in, like they do so much different kinds of writing that we'll show up sometimes and like, we'll say, I've got 5 ideas. Let me know what you think of them. Sometimes that's what we bring to the table. And I have several ideas, short term and then longer term, that I want to get in there. And part of that is that I want to set one of my books I want to set in is in Coney Island, of all places that I just mentioned before. But early 20th century Coney Island, but that's going to be a longer project. And I always, I have my podcast to keep me busy. I have my work to keep me busy. But this was, I loved having this. This is like the best moments of my life is having this book. But yeah, I want to make more.
Okay.
I just don't know. But people are like, well, what's the next one? And I want to be able to say, like, I got to pitch an agent. I got to come up with a proposal. I got to figure out. I know what I would love to write, the book of Saturday Night Fever. I would love to write that book. Like, would it be an oral history or whatever? Like, I'd really love to put that together. Is there an audience? Can I get a publisher?
Yeah,
Can I get these people participate?
Well, so the secondary questions you asked are a lot harder. And, yes, you'll get people to participate, but who is a question? But like I read, all right, the oral history of Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that there are some big names from that movie missing from that book, you don't need them. Like there's enough of the rest of the cast that kind of tell the story that you're looking for if you're a fan. And I would have to believe Saturday Night Fever has a larger audience than Dazed and Confused.
I would think so.
It just a hunch. Like I like that movie and people are like, why? Like, I don't know. Linklater gets me. All right. Like, I'm sorry. I'm that guy. And there's enough of me that the book was greenlit. Like, I don't know. So I think that, that's an option. I would also say, like, do you want to stay in nonfiction? Like I had, Brian J. Jones was on here and he's a biographer and he basically has at the moment has published books about creators and he talks about the fact that like I have my shelf. Like I wrote about George Lucas. I wrote about Jim Henson. I wrote about Dr. Seuss. Like I have a shelf And I think in his next project, I believe he's kind of breaking away from his shelf. I don't remember, but I think so. But like, do you want to do you want a shelf, I guess, or do you want it to be like, oh no, the books but with my name on the spine are all over this. They're not together.
That's interesting to say that. I think there's a couple of movie books I'd like to write that are nonfiction for sure. I have a couple of nonfiction ideas that I want to do with that, but there's fiction work I want to do, and it's historical fiction that I want to do. So that would be on a different shelf.
Yeah.
It would probably be in a Brooklyn shelf, though. I mean, if you're going to have a Brooklyn section, it would be there. But that's there. But also, I have ideas for podcasts, and I have the podcasts I want to do for me in my own way, and then I want to pitch some ideas for like Wondery or somebody like that. And that's a whole next level of, like writing scripts and budgeting things and that kind of stuff.
So you just want to be a media maven, I guess?
Yeah, that's in my bio. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When people say, do you want to live any other time? I'm like, no, this one. We've got the internet. I got Wi-Fi. Women are treated better than any other time except for abortion, of course. But I mean, why would I go back 100 years?
Well, that's fair. I can't disagree with any of that, excepting to say that, like, I've had the conversation about shutting off the internet before because I feel like it always comes up. I don't know if I bring it out in people and they're like, would you shut off the internet? Like, I don't know what it is about me that comes up all the time, but I've established the fact that nothing changes for me. Mm-hmm. Like, nothing changes for me. My blog goes to newspapers, which make a resilient comeback if the internet goes away. And my podcast goes to terrestrial radio, which, again, makes a brilliant comeback if the internet goes away. Like, I get to keep doing what I'm doing. And as a reader, the content I consume doesn't really change either. So, I mean, I get that, but I wouldn't want to go back either because it's not a secret now, although I don't know when it will come out, but I am experiencing Star Trek from the very beginning as someone who doesn't know it.
Interesting.
I mean, I know it. I know the cultural things, but I had friends pick on me for like, how come you know this? I was like, it's in the ether. It's like people that don't watch Star Wars, but know do or do not. Like they live long and prosper is in the zeitgeist. You don't need to watch Star Trek to understand it.
Right.
And so I was like, you know what? Let me do it. I'm going to do it. So I'm going to, obviously there's a lot of it, but like I started from the beginning.
You started the TV series?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to do the movies too, but like for me, I don't know if it's me personally or like me, the geek and lots of geeks. I don't know what it is, but I start at the beginning. Like there are plenty of ways to do other things and to read things out of order but I like to start at the beginning. So, yeah, it's the original series, and then it's going to be the animated series, and then it's going to be movies 1 through 5, and then it's going to be next gen. And look, it's going to take me years to get through all this, and I'll document it on the blog at some point. But that's something I couldn't do if the internet goes away. Although I could, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I've been keeping my distance from the internet. While I need the internet to stream Star Trek, I kind of I've avoided my social presence went down. I know people have issues with Musk and Zuckerberg and all of those guys. But I stopped long before that. I kind of slowed down. I went, I don't like this anymore. And I put it down. And now I text a lot more than I used to. And I consume a lot more media instead of just endlessly scrolling. So I'm also that guy that's like, yeah, my life is on the internet, but I hate it.
See, I don't hate it. I
okay.
think, yeah, it's I find it very convenient. It was essential for me for research, for doing all the things I had to do to make sure the book was accurate. It was everything. And also just, when is it a great time to be a woman? That's what I have to like tell people. Like, oh, 100 years ago, or even like 50 years ago. No.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with you. And I'm that it's the interesting thing about watching Star Trek, which was created in 67, 68, 69. Like, when you think about what was going on in 67, 68, and 69, like, it's really hard to watch that show without thinking about what was going on.
Well,
like, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that because I also co-host a show called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies, Sonia and I, and we just did Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. And I could only talk about it. I know there's Trekkies that can talk about every single scene and every single Easter egg that's in there. And so I was like, I could barely keep up with this plot. I mean, for me, I need to talk more about just overall what Star Trek is to the pop culture and to pop culture, but also just to the culture that we all live in and when they created and what it was like then, what was it like in the late 70s, what's it like in the 80s and 90s. I mean, Star Trek's it's intricately a part of all of that. And I love the ethos of Star Trek, that live long and prosper, but it's also just kindness and compassion. You'll find out.
What I'll say is as far as the original series goes, and it'll come up in conversation just because I'm consuming so much of it. It'll come up on this podcast probably time and time again for a while. As of right now, I'm almost done with the original series. Mm-hmm. And it is so hopeful. Like, it reminds me, the writer's room for Star Trek reminds me of like NASA, where these guys were so focused on putting a man on the moon that they were still in 1950s fashion in 1970 when the moon stuff when the moon shots stopped and they went back to see what the real world was, because the whole world had passed them by. They were driving their same cars and dressing their same way for just this one thing. And that's what it feels like watching Trek, because it's so hopeful. Like, it's I joke that like in 68 Kennedy's dying every other day, but like there's a lot of shit going on in 68. For a show to be that hopeful is so out of place. Especially considering all the other stuff I've consumed from the 60s and early 70s that's, let's be real, not hopeful. Like, yeah. I wonder what's our media going to be like in 60 years? Like, we got some stuff going on. Like, is it going to be hopeful? I don't think so. I don't think I've watched anything recent that's been hopeful.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't think of anything hopeful. I don't know.
I mean, there's always lessons, right? There's always lessons. But I think that's like, when you are you still reading?
Oh, of course.
Are you reading current or like?
I read everything.
Okay, because it's only in the last couple of years that I've read, and your book included, books that have been published within the last 12 months. Otherwise, most of my books are published before Y2K. Like, that's or 1980 for that matter, right? Like, I've been reading a lot of older things. But newer stuff, it's not that I don't like it. I've liked most of all of the, I don't know, current things I've read, but I just find that there's a lot more to learn from the older stuff. Do you think your reading has an impact on your writing?
Absolutely. And they say that if you want to write, you have to be able to read, and you have to read often, because you need to take in different styles. You need to take in information. You need to feel what it's like to be a reader, because what you want is to have readers buy your work. So what works? What's popular? What do you find to be good storytelling? What is something that you want to emulate in your own way, of course? But I've always been a reader. It's not tough for me. I've always been a reader.
Do you, like, and you read everything?
Everything.
Do you challenge yourself? Like, are there times when you're like, you read a book that you wouldn't normally read?
Well, yeah, well, that's for the show Book versus Movie. We're constantly challenging ourselves. I would never have read sci-fi as much as I have in the last few years because of the show, but then it turns out I love sci-fi. There's lots of things. Yeah, I mean, I do challenge myself. I don't have the time or the wherewithal to go through some of the classics that are like 800 pages or so. That ship has sailed. I mean, maybe when I'm older, I'll pick up Dubliners or something like that. But I'm fine without it. I read so much as it is.
I'm gonna be reading some of that old stuff because the challenge I've been on for the last couple of years is I'm gonna read all the books in my house. Which doesn't seem like a lot of challenge unless you're me and you just held on to books for. I don't know why I have some of these books, but I'm gonna read them and find out. And some of them are like, oh, I don't know if I like reading this, but I mean, you finish it. I don't know about you, but I'm the type of reader. Once I start it, even if I don't like it, I'm gonna finish it.
No, I can put something down.
I can't. I just can't. I don't know what it is.
I know. It's a completist thing. I don't know. Maybe that's it. I had a friend that was like that with The New Yorker. And she would I'd see her and she'd be like exhausted she'd be exhausted. And I'm like, why are you so tired? Because I was up till 2 a.m. reading The New Yorker. And I'm like, well, what did you read? She goes, well, I read everything. Like she starts page 1, and me, I flip through what sounds interesting, are there images attached? Does that seem like my jam? No, it doesn't seem my jam. Whatever. But she was like, no, I read. When she read the newspaper, Sunday newspaper, hours, because she read every section. I don't have that in me. My brain just, even if I did it, I wouldn't remember it. So
the memory part is, I think for me, and I might have done better in school had I figured this out when I was still, in school. For me, the blog helps me remember and retain more about the books I read because I take notes as I go along. But because I'm a purist and I don't like highlighting or writing in books, I just make little notes like first paragraph, page 70. And then I go back and I type out whatever I really enjoyed from that. And then I write my thoughts about the book. And that process has basically made it so that I remember and retain a lot more of the book than when I was just reading the book. And people are like, well, what did you learn? The bad guy died. Like, I mean, you need more than that. And I think that I've found a process that works for me. Which is weird because I'm not getting graded anymore. So of course now I've got it down pat. Now I've figured
out how do you take in information. When we were growing up, nobody takes the time to try to find out. You're all going to learn the same way. We're going to give you the same amount of time. That's that. And I'm the same way. Like I need to sometimes hear something and then read it and then write it down. But it's very hard for me to listen and write down at the same time.
Yeah. And the other thing that's weird, and I think weird's the right thing for this, is I find myself wondering, because I've been going through old things, because I probably held on to more books. I held on to I was a pack rat for most of my life. And I've disavowed myself of that notion, thank God. Otherwise, I would have no place to move in my house. But as I go through older things, I'm just amazed at what seems to be talent that I had then no interest in using. I'm using it now. The blog is me using that talent. But like, I've read some papers that are like, wow, this is actually really good, but like, it seems wasted on just a college essay. like what like this was for an audience of one. This is wasted on an audience of one. That, by the way, gave me a B. Thank you. I don't know, some of that stuff, and I don't know what I'll make of it. And that's like, I kind of envy you, because like there's a small part of me, very small, that wants to write a book, but I have no ideas. Like, you, in the course of the last 30 minutes, have probably mentioned about like 5 different books you would write. Mm-hmm. I could take the next 30 minutes in silence and not come up with one. None. Just, I don't know. And I write 3 times a week.
Right.
Like, it's not I've had authors on before, and they're always like, you got to treat it like a job, and you got to do it on a regular basis.
Yes.
I have all of that down. I can't come up with the thing. Like, the one thing. I don't know. Maybe it's my ADHD playing into it, which is why I don't have a authors podcast or a blog that's only about books, right? Like, I write about everything. I talk to everybody, but I don't have that one thing that I have these conversations with you, and I go like, that's amazing. Like,
you're making me feel better about myself. Trust me. Thank you very much. But it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of, I mean, maybe it's because I worked in marketing and PR too. Like, you get a lot of rejection. You have to constantly come up with ideas for stories, and you will get rejected. Either it's not working, or it's not good enough, or it just doesn't fit for what they're doing, or they're wrong and you're right, but they're wrong, and there's no way around it. I mean, you just have to get a thicker skin.
Well, I mean, the podcast has given me that. Like, my job search and the podcast have basically made me immune to failure, or at the very least rejection, because I'm a one-man podcast, and without you, I'm talking to myself, and I don't want to put that out. Like, I'll do solo episodes on occasion, but I don't want to be the guy who's rambling on for 40 minutes by myself. So I need you. No. And I need guests.
I'm the same way. I can't do it.
And in order to get guests, you have to ask people. And at the very least, for someone like me, who I don't always just want to have my circle of friends on my show, that seems insidious at the very least. I have to go out of my circle. And if you go out of your circle, you're going to get rejected at least half the time. And this is going to be like episode 90 or something. I don't even know anymore. But when you figure that out, like, I've been rejected at least as many times as there's episodes, probably double that. Mm-hmm. And I've looked for a job for almost the entire length of this podcast. That's a couple years of rejection. It's fine. Like, when it happens, it happens. When somebody says yes, they'll be on my show, great. Somebody says no, oh, it's fine. Like, and I think you learn that. I'm not afraid of the rejection. I think I might be more afraid of success than I am of failure. But I don't know where that comes from. It's just a thought that just pops into my head every once in a while and then goes away.
Right. I think that's more of like, what if I only have one idea? What if I only have one album? What if I only have one movie? What if I only have one book? What if I only have one whatever?
Yeah.
That's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, especially for you and me, who always have a next thing. Like, there's always a next thing. Although, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I am very comfortable being the guy behind the guy. Mm-hmm. I'm helping edit my buddy's second book of poetry. I edited his first one. For me, and maybe this is why I don't have any of those ideas for books, I'm just as happy editing his book of poetry as I would be of probably creating my own. And I'm okay helping produce a movie for a friend than I am producing my own. I think I've gotten to that point. And I don't know where that comes from, because
it's humility. It's also, yeah.
Is that what that is?
Yeah. And it's, yeah, people, my favorite quote from one of my editors that I worked in magazines for years. And she said, people used to have a lot more respect for their shortcomings. People used to really understand, and then just understanding like what you're good at, what you're not good at, and learning along the way, and not like you're a shining star every moment. Like, really like, yeah, I mean, I'm good at that too. I'm really good at just like, I'll just do the work. I'll do the editing, and nobody has to see me do the editing. That's not interesting, is it? But I'll do it because it needs to get done. And I like, it's part of the process for me in the storytelling is putting the elements together. I've worked in PR. I've promoted for other people all the goddamn time for years. Sometimes huge celebrities, big stars, sometimes just products, whatever. And then also I've promoted myself. And that's been that feels new. That's different.
As a content creator, and this, we never promote ourselves enough.
Well, people would argue with you about me.
Maybe not yourself, but your stuff. I don't think we ever promote our stuff, because I know that I much prefer creating than promoting.
I like both, to be honest.
Okay.
I really, it could be that because that was my job. So I appreciate, what's so funny is like, because I feel like, I'm promoting all the time, and I try to make sure to do everything, Facebook and LinkedIn and blah, blah, blah. But you think like, and I'm sure I have friends that were like, oh God, does she keep talking about her book? Look, I got one thing I'm excited about to sell, like step aside. But, you'd be surprised. I was surprised at how many people would be, the book came out in October, December, we're like, I didn't know you wrote a book. What's it about? Oh, and then they would buy tons of copies. Like you never know when you're going to catch people. And so that was my big lesson. There's lots of big lessons I learned.
Yeah, I think that it's what, we talked earlier about like not being the shining star and knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. I also think that people need to kind of open their eyes a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Because like, I know if I could get like, if I had money and I could get an intern, I could probably do much better with somebody who's not me. Because I think there's for all the ego that's involved in, hey, I think you should listen to my show because it's good. There's a lot of ego like pushback that's like, don't call too much attention to yourself.
Right.
I don't know where that is, because obviously like I'm putting this out on the internet and I'm publishing a blog that's on the internet. Like I'm not hiding this stuff, but I'm also, I don't know, like I have a problem standing up on my soapbox and being like, hey, look at my stuff. Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, no one knows unless you do it.
Well, that's true.
If you show pride in what you do and what you're putting out, people respond to that. And anybody who gives you a hard time is just an asshole and just don't even.
Well, that, and like, what have you created? I mean, that's the other thing. Like, you put out a book, right, and I've not. So, like, like you have something to be proud of. That's, Yeah,
and that's my time, and I'm going to take it because I've been through enough. I mean, I lost both of my parents and both of my brothers in the last 7 years. I've been through some shit.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. So if I have this time, something that makes me happy, makes me feel good, I'm going to take that time and enjoy it. And y'all can join me or get the hell out of my way as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and that's the thing I've noticed. And I don't like talking about marketing because I think when it's done right, it's clean, but I think most of the time it's just dirty. And that's from my experience in marketing. It's just,
Yeah.
I too many followers, not enough creators. And I mean, literal creators, like not enough people that are trying new things. There's too many people that are like, oh, that worked for Coke. That worked for Verizon. That worked for so-and-so. Like, let's do that for us. It's like, well, you're not Coke. You're not
Right.
but I just, I think that might be my aversion to it for myself. It's just like, I don't have any new ideas. I don't know what I want to do to shine the light on myself. But then again, this podcast isn't about shining a light on me. It's about shining a light on you. Like, really, and that's, I talk to interesting people that will either teach me something or, teach my audience something. And I like highlighting others.
So do I. I like, yeah. I'm the same way. I think we have just healthy egos. I don't feel diminished when I promote another person or I shine a light on someone else. I don't feel worse about myself at all. So, I mean, but some people do. Some people totally need to be the center of attention. They're very uncomfortable when they have to abdicate any of that. And then there's some people who just are so mousy they can't even shine a light. They're so withdrawn. They're so quiet. I think you and I, it's just a healthy balance.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Before I let you go, I have to ask, favorite movie filmed in Brooklyn?
Moonstruck. I have a few films that I put in my bio that, and there's Do the Right Thing, The Warriors, Little Fugitive. There's great movies that were made in Brooklyn. But the one that I kept going back to, and that I've watched like 4 times in the last 2 years, it would be Moonstruck. I think Moonstruck is so much more than a rom-com from the 80s. It's so smart. It's funny as hell. It's weird. You have no idea where they're going with it. And the use of Brooklyn is amazing. And the cast is amazing. And Cher and Nicolas Cage are just at their best. They're so beautiful and they look great together. And I can't recommend it enough. When people ask me that, that's all I say. Moonstruck.
There are some great universal truths that come up during this episode. Timing is everything. Reading and good writing are inescapably intertwined. The publishing industry is generally much harder than people outside of it presume. In this conversation, all 3 things ring not only true, but they combine into the narrative of Margo's story for creating her first published book. I have, over my lifetime, attempted to journal. And with the exception of 4 months in the spring of the year 2000, I have never been successful. Now, you could argue that I'm just not the journaling type, clearly. I'm old enough to be living for more than 400 months, and yet in only 4 specific ones did I actually journal daily. That seems like it wouldn't be my thing, and yet I've attempted a few more times since the year 2000. You could argue that those 4 months were unique and that was what led to the journals I still have being full of words and thoughts and stories. But I find some fault with that because while it was the most chaotic semester of my life, it was also the busiest. I had the least amount of time to journal, and yet I still found a way. So now we're back to timing and how it's everything. Perhaps that's it. My bright spot in journaling is punctuated by 2 plane rides, and that's just the way it is. And that's okay. But I still make attempts, although now they are only feeble ones because the blog and this podcast have replaced the urge, though daily writing is something others tell me I'd love. Who knows? But the point is that timing of that trip, who I was then and what was happening, was clearly the right time for my journaling to happen. And I'm not sad about that. That it hasn't worked out since or any time before is immaterial. I have a college degree because of those journals. I recreated that very project in episode 24 of this podcast. I know that having moved to a more public venue with blogging and podcasting has not ruined my ability to tell stories and share information. There isn't much I don't share on the podcast, and while I'm more guarded with the blog, I would argue it has replaced my journaling. So, what does this have to do with timing, reading, and the publishing industry that I spoke of at the very beginning of this diatribe? It is an example of timing being everything. Sure, I was in a foreign land on my own, but so were the others with me. I was reading new books and seeing new things, and I decided to publish it in my own way. Not everyone has to go through traditional publishing channels, but that doesn't make it any less hard. When you're inspired, whether it be for 4 hours or 4 months, make sure you don't waste the inspiration, because it doesn't always maintain, and sometimes you can lose it for a very long time. And I'm not upset that journaling only worked out once for me. I'm actually happy it worked out at all. So do me a favor. The next time you have the inspiration to write, draw, create, do it. And if you're willing to share it with me, I'd love to see what you can come up with. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 91. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact myself and my guest Margo Donohue in the show notes. There, you will find more information about Margo, her book, and many of her podcasts at her website, brooklynfitchick.com. And Filmed in Brooklyn, her debut published work can be found there, as well as at many large retailers and online. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Margo, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah. What is your favorite movie from Brooklyn?
Oh, I should have seen this coming. Okay, so Moonstruck is a very good one because it's one of those films that make me believe that my parents have really great taste in media, because like they were like, you have to watch this. And Moonstruck is up there for them with like Lovers and Other Strangers, Stripes, like just these films that we quote all the time in the family. So I guess I don't know. I kind of discount all the Marvel stuff because I feel like it's not. I love Marvel, don't get me wrong, but there's a part of me that feels like it doesn't belong on any favorites lists, because most of the time it's our investment in Marvel that makes us enjoy. Okay, Iron Man is the exception because that one can stand on its own. But like any of the subsequent ones that might feature in either Brooklyn or Manhattan or any of the 5 boroughs,
Spider-Man,
all happen down the road. So we're invested in the world of the MCU. So I feel like I can't take one of those. And it's been so long since I've seen Saturday Night Fever that I don't know if I could include that. And I think I'd prefer to watch Moonstruck over The Warriors, like if given a choice. I'd have to be in the mood for The Warriors. And I think the same can be said for Do the Right Thing. And
yeah,
like I think Moonstruck is a 90% of the time I'll say yes, put it on.
It's a perfect movie. It really is like a minute and 37 minutes. This movie just kind of finds its way and just tells the story. And if this were, and I love Judd Apatow, but if Apatow done this movie, it would have been 2.5 hours. It would have been.
I don't know, because Apatow's movies, he really kind of he doesn't want to go over 2 hours.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you there. Let's agree to disagree there.
Okay.
I have my feelings about it.
I mean, I haven't seen any of the more recent ones just because I've kind of fallen away from that kind of stuff.
He's great at self-promotion. I think he unfollowed me on Twitter or something because I teased him one time, but because he was just really promoting a movie for like 6 weeks straight. But that's how you do it. It's the other side of me. Like, there's a part of me that wants to sit there and I'm like, but how else do you get your message out?
Well, and good for him.
Get your message out, yeah.
But he's a director and a producer and a writer.
Yeah, and a writer, yeah,
and how many
actor?
director, producer, writers do you know that actually promote their movie? Like, aside from the one tweet, which is like, my movie comes out tomorrow, go see it. Like,
and they do the interviews in New York and LA, and then they call it a day. Whereas here, he's like the whole process. Yeah. We just signed Amy Schumer to do a script. We're going to head the first day there. I mean, he does build that, and I give him major props for that. And he'd be a dream client, I think, because he's somebody that just because I can't tell you, I've worked with authors. Holy shit. I had one guy, he's such an asshole. He was from Philadelphia, Tom Moon. He was an NPR writer. I think he's still with NPR. But he did a book about 1,000 albums to listen to before you die. So it's like along with those, the places to visit, blah, blah, blah. And he worked for Rolling Stone for a while. And the first day I met him, I said, get a copy, send it to Jan Wenner. Just send to Jan Wenner. Just write a little note. Yeah. Hey, buddy, I just wrote a book. I hope you like it. That's all you got to do. He never did it. Never sent it to anyone he ever worked with. I said, just send a note because I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, so we were going to be in, they took a photo of it. It was for a Christmas list, and it didn't make the cut. And it didn't make the cut because it didn't make the cut, but he was calling me, screaming at me. Like, why didn't I make the cut? And I'm like, I'm not at Rolling Stone. I'm not an editor. I can't do that. And I said, and it's on you to reach out to people you know. And he was like, you never told me. He's such a fucking liar. I hate this guy.
I'm going to get all of the names wrong, but the premise that it reminds me of is, look, I'm a fan of Sorkin in almost any fashion, and I was very enthralled by HLN's West Wing marathons over not only Thanksgiving but the holidays too.
The holidays. I was on vacation watching it. I got into it.
So when you're telling that story, I immediately think of Toby recruiting CJ when she falls in the pool. And she's like, so-and-so, I got fired because so-and-so fell from 5th most powerful man to 20th most powerful man. And Toby's like, and it matters? And she's like, they take this really seriously. And to me, an outsider, not in Hollywood, I'm Toby. How can you take this seriously? And CJ, who's obviously working for the thing, is like, no, they really take this seriously. And to me, if you're going to take it seriously, to your point, you have to write the letter. You can't you can't leave. And if you're not, if you take it seriously, you can't leave anything to chance. You have to write the follow up. You have to send the email, even if it goes unnoticed. You have to do it, because if you don't, you fall, or you don't get the thing, or you're not featured, or whatever. And that's not to say that if you do it, you will. But if you don't, there's less of a chance, I guess.
If you cover your ass.
Yeah.
And, it's something that the guy, it's not like you're sending him 1,000 pound of your new poetry. You're sending him something the guy is interested in.
Yeah.
Right? So it's never like bothering people. I went to my contacts, and some people didn't get back to me, of course. But a lot of people did. And they were helpful. It doesn't, they could have been like, we didn't sell enough ad pages, so that photo didn't make it in there. So none of the things that were in the photo made it in there. This is all magazine shit.
Yeah.
But But he just was like, you never told me. And it was such a lie, but it's also just like, why not set yourself up for the most chance of success? Why? It takes nothing to send an email to someone and say, hey, it's been a while. I'm working on something. I thought you might be interested in it. Let me know. I'd be happy to send you a copy, or, anyway, just checking in. Hope you're doing well. Boom. And people I don't ignore those things. When somebody sends me,
No,
I pay attention.
I respond to those things.
Yeah.
I would love email to come back and be more than a graveyard of e-newsletters I didn't read. Like I would like at this point, like I would love an email that said like, hey, even from a former guest, from a stranger, like, hey, I'm working on this thing, you might be interested. Or even from like, it doesn't have to be a listener being like, oh, I like the show. It could just be like, hey, I'm working on a thing, thought you might be interested.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? How many of it would be the equivalent of getting a letter in the mail, like a real letter in the mail.
Like a real birthday card or something from somebody you haven't heard from in a while. Like something like that. Right. And sure, there's some industries like in LA, everyone's pitching each other. And if in bands, people are constantly pitching each other. But I'm just talking about, you worked on something, it exists, it's really good, and you want people to know about it. I would never ignore that email or that text or Facebook post or whatever. Somebody just reached out and said, hey, I wrote something about Brooklyn. You might be interested in it. I'd at least respond.
Yeah.
Wait, why would you not do that? But then there's that whole thing like, I don't want to look like I'm trying. I don't want to look like I'm asking for things. I don't want to work too hard for attention. I want it just to come to me. And I'm just like, you're going to lose a lot of shit in life if that's your attitude.
That's not, yeah.
Seriously.
That's not how attention works. Like,
no.
When was the last time you turned your head really sharply to look at something that didn't happen?
Right.
No, you heard a crash and you looked to your left.
That's a good point. It's infuriating. Yeah. It's like he tried to follow me like on LinkedIn or something, and I'm just like, shoo, you got to go. I just can't. I can't with you. But yeah, that was like a big thing to me. Like if you know somebody, and people like make fun of nepotism babies, but it's like if you know someone, use your contacts. Like, why not?
Yeah, and the
world isn't fair.
I've been looking for a job for long enough that like there have been times when I'm like, I don't want to get a job because of my parents. But then again, like they're just introducing me. And how is that any different than like Margo gave me your contact number. My father gave you got me your contact number. Like it's not really, it's not that different, but I think
that's how life works.
We all have to go through that moment. But here's the thing, the difference, right? You have to come out the other side and go, well, I'll take the help where I can get it. And there are plenty of people that remain in the dark. They never come out the other side. They're never willing to settle. And these are the people that still play the lottery. Like, the odds are not in your favor, buddy.
When you hear about actors who didn't get in or didn't get famous from that, you hear about like Brad Pitt. It was like, what did he do? He took every job he could get. He was in a chicken costume and giving out flyers. He did everything. Yeah, sure, he's gorgeous, Brad Pitt, and things are going to be easier for you. But it's just like you have to put yourself out there, and you have to, and it's uncomfortable. So just find a way to do it that makes you comfortable. But yeah, I had a friend that when I was doing the social media before. And she said, why are you giving away all your images? No one's going to buy your book now. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Like,
I did write words in this book. Like,
it's she's so dumb. She's not a friend anymore. But anyway, it's just yeah. I think our generation, I don't know if you're Gen X or not. I'm Gen X.
I'm
or Gen Z. Are you?
I'm in between.
Yeah.
I'm in between, but I have all of the Gen X values, so I consider myself Gen X because I feel like at the end of the day, it's the values you have that determine your generation.
And we're very much like, we don't want to look like we're trying too hard, right? That's the poser was a big word, you know, that was thrown around the 80s and 90s. It's just like when you look like you're just trying too hard and working too hard, you know, when you make fun of a Tracy Flick in Election, whereas you get a little older, you're like, Tracy's just doing her thing and trying to get ahead of the world. It's like you change that
it's the
mindset.
It's the part we don't think about when we use the term poser is, well, do you know if they did the work or not?
Yeah.
Like if they're actually and you don't know that, by the way, like we throw that word around. Of course we do. But if somebody's doing the work.
And if you don't like it, so what? Yeah. I mean, that's another thing. Like that's also
turn it off. You don't have to watch it.
You don't have to listen to disco if you don't like disco. If you don't like Billy Ray Cyrus, you don't have to listen to him. You can trust me, you can create a universe where this shit doesn't enter your life. It's not that big of a deal. But then it's a weird white male centered universe where it's like you can't look like you're trying too hard. You can't, things should just appeal to you. And you get angry if they don't. And it's just, that's the bullshit from that generation that I'm glad is gone away. I'm glad nobody uses the word poser because it's a stupid word. And Bon Jovi's, they're posers of metal. Like they're making millions of dollars. They'll be working the rest of their goddamn lives. I like the Iggy Pop who said, I'm no martyr. Use my music for whatever you want. I got to make a living. Like that's the attitude.